President Trump was right. The majority of the national press is the enemy of we the people. We'll present more evidence that proves that in tonight's preamble. The founders of this nation knew that a free and fair press was a vital check against abusive government. A good and well-trained journalist will check his or her personal biases at the door and report facts about any given story. Today's press, corrupted by liberals in corporate America and the even more corrupt higher education system, have taken down these barriers of fairness. Instead, so-called reporters have been molded to be activists. They abuse the public trust to create what they are told is a better world by denigrating conservatives and Republicans and in turn promoting socialist Democrats and their often manufactured issues. For conservatives, many stories are created or artificially cast in the worst light possible. For socialist Democrats, negative stories are glossed over or ignored altogether. Now, we've seen evidence of this on TV screens for years. Every day, most media organizations have editorial meetings. We have one daily on the Chris Salcedo Show. This is a meeting that charts the course for the day's news coverage. Allegedly, for the last couple of months, a real journalist, James O'Keefe, from Project Veritas, has been listening in on CNN's daily editorial meetings run by Jeff Zucker, a well-known liberal extremist. For years, Zucker has used the so-called news divisions at MSNBS and CNN to advance his own destructive politics. Today, Mr. O'Keefe let CNN know that Project Veritas investigated them, the very kind of investigation CNN refuses to do on socialist Democrats.
This is James O'Keefe. We've been listening to your CNN calls for basically 2 months, recording everything. Just wanted to ask you some questions if you have a minute. Do you still feel you're the most trusted name in news? Because I have to say, from what I've been hearing on these phone calls, I don't know about that. I mean, we got a lot of recordings that indicate you're not really that independent of a journalist.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. So everybody, in light of that, I think what we'll do is we'll set up a new system and we'll be back with you. We'll do the rest of the call a little bit later.
We're going to release those recordings today at 7 o'clock. So stay tuned. It's going to be fun.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, having a good day, yeah. We will, of course, bring you the lowlights from CNN's election editorial meetings tomorrow. I suspect that we will have it confirmed that CNN is a liberal opinion channel, tailoring their coverage to protect the malfeasance perpetrated by socialist Democrats while they simultaneously invent controversy for the GOP. What we won't hear is news. Case in point, CNN has been one of the media outlets that has come very close to holding communist China blameless for over 275,000 American deaths, allegedly from the China virus. Even in the face of their fellow countrymen dying, the liberal opinion network of CNN, just like the Socialist Democrat Party writ large, protected China and their lies in an effort to lash out at an American president they hate. Until yesterday.
We have some breaking news for you in our world lead. CNN has obtained leaked documents from inside China, documents that reveal the missteps and the chaos of the Chinese government's early response to the coronavirus pandemic. The documents are from Hubei province, home to the city of Wuhan, where the pandemic is thought to have started. They show authorities released misleading public data on the number of deaths and the number of cases. They took, on average, 3 weeks to diagnose a new case and much more.
We've known and reported that China lied months ago. And I'm a big fan of waiting for all the information before going to air with a big story. But one of two things happened with CNN's China virus coverage, which they actually started covering yesterday. CNN is either staffed with some of the worst reporters in American history, or they were instructed to ignore the story until after the election. Don Jr. thinks the reason for the 10-month lag time in reporting was because CNN really sucks at their job. He tweeted, quote, CNN finally realizes China lied 10 months later. The mockery continued, courtesy of Mike Hahn, director of social media for the Trump campaign. He tweeted, exclusive, China lies, CNN shocked. And Steve Krakauer, a former CNN employee, thinks CNN sacrificed their news credibility to slant the election, writing, quote, the kind of story that gets published on November 30th, but not on October 30th. During Barack Obama's occupation of the Oval Office, trust in government plummeted to record lows. That loss of trust was earned because liberals lie and sacrifice the well-being of our nation to advance their own destructive politics and policies. The loss of trust in CNN and other left-wing media agencies is a result of the same thing.
Earlier, we spoke with the founder of the Voter Integrity Project, Matt Brainerd, about his testimony in front of Arizona lawmakers during yesterday's election-focused public hearing. Now, today, the Michigan Senate Oversight Committee also held a hearing about the 2020 election. And during the hearing, there were a number of examples of potential election fraud and irregularities, including from freelance IT workers, from poll watchers who highlighted issues that they witnessed during the vote tabulation process. Take a listen here to how this Dominion software contractor described her experience working with the company.
Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee.
Hi,
you have
thank
3
you.
minutes.
Thank you. My name is Melissa Carone. I am a resident of Wayne County. I have a background in IT and cybersecurity. I was contracted by PDS staffing to work with Dominion Voting Systems, assisting with IT at the TCF Center. What I witnessed at the TCF Center was complete fraud. The whole 27 hours I was there, there was batches of ballots being ran through the tabulating machines numerous times, being counted 8 to 10 times. Also, the adjudication process, I witnessed numerous people walking up claiming they were both Democrats, saying they were sitting together, judging ballots all night together, all day together. I witnessed it all. I was on the main stage with all of the city officials. Daniel Baxter was in on the whole thing, and I am under the impression 100% that at least 90% of those workers were all in on this. There was not a single ballot the whole night, the whole 27 hours I was there, that I saw that was for Donald Trump. Not one, not a single ballot. That is scary. There was something going on at that Department of Elections, and it's clearly something that's very illegal that occurred there.
Now, that was just one example of the testimony that came in today, and another example of anomalies and irregularities that have already been reported and documented in places like Pennsylvania and Georgia. It's something that data expert Justin Hart has been following closely. He joins us now. Justin, thank you so much for joining us. First, let's just start with your reaction to this hearing in Michigan today, Justin.
Well, this is some of the most damning testimony that I've heard to date from the hearings that we saw, or the forums that we saw in Arizona and Pennsylvania to the hearing today. I think there was some really distinct things there. What your viewers have to understand is that we're looking over this voting pipeline, right? We kind of see it from one end or another, and there's just a bunch of smoke coming from different ends. One of the big smoke plumes that's coming up are what we might call election day shenanigans, right? There were things that were happening during the count that are really amiss, and we really need to account for. And again, there's not a lot of transparency into any of these systems, so it's hard to account for what's happening with the logged votes. And can we, for example, identify these votes that she said were run through the scanner multiple times? Because that is completely unethical, and they all know it. And I think there's serious ramifications if we don't investigate this further.
Yeah, and Justin, explain for all of our viewers who have never been there in an election counting center where people are actually counting ballots, how can something like this happen? And what does it really mean for somebody to take a group of ballots and run it through multiple times? Shouldn't that be caught as fraud? Kind of just explain to our viewers kind of some of the mechanics of how something like that might happen, as we had a witness testify today that it did happen.
Well, there's a spectrum of explanations. On one end is the more nefarious, this was fraudulent and someone purposely decided to run ballots through and have it run up the tally. There's probably what she described is ineptitude. Basically, when you have a set of ballots, you run them through the scanner and one of them jams. Now, the purpose of that is if it jams, you're supposed to back out the votes and do it again, or at least take the votes that have already gone through and set those aside. But it's been what she was describing was that when the printer or the scanner would jam, that they would take the whole batch of votes and scan them through again. So if it was, I think she described number 25 in the rung was maybe bad and got caught because these are all folded papers, that they would run the first 24 again. And so it's just a real ineptitude is one of the things that I think we're seeing in all these smoke plumes, both with the software itself and with, frankly, the people that were running these aptitudes here.
Yeah. Now, Justin, you've been watching not only what's happened in Michigan today during this hearing, but you've also been watching what's been happening around the country. Sticking just with Michigan for the moment, what was the most significant things that you thought came out of the Michigan hearing today?
Well, I think the Michigan hearings brought to bear a lot of that election day smoke plume, as I've discussed. Mm-hmm. What I've been looking at, from my perspective, is the other end of the pipeline, right, where we're looking at the end results of the votes themselves, right? And what we're missing is the fire in between, and we're getting some of that today at the election hearing. But what we see is kind of what scientists do to discover black holes, right? Mm-hmm. They can't really see the black hole, but it bends everything around it in a very specific way. And that's what we see on the voter side of things, is that everything is bending in a very specific way, and frankly, oddly towards Vice President Biden's tally of votes there. So it's very difficult to perceive this as anything but an anomaly. And we would love to track this all back. In Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, for example, in the middle of the night, there were 143,000 votes that went through just at 3 a.m. for Vice President Biden, and a very, very, very small portion. Now, someone might attribute that to, let's say, mail-in votes around Milwaukee, but we have no way of knowing and tracing that back. The sort of what they call the chain of custody is broken so many times before it even reaches the dashboards that you and I see on Newsmax or other news networks that are getting their feeds on election nights for all the colorful maps. So it's a difficult proposition to really unfold.
Yeah, and I think that the black hole analogy is a really good one, and it speaks to the frustration that a lot of our viewers have. I mean, a lot of people are saying, look, why don't we just do a recount? Why don't we just do a complete audit? Like, explain for our viewers some of the challenges as you look at the election data that comes out. You've referred to it as kind of the smoke signals that you see. Like, what do we need to do to actually get to the bottom? And is it possible to get to the bottom of what really happened in these elections that might explain some of these irregularities or anomalies?
I think it will, as we saw, for example, from the 2000 election. Eventually, those votes were from FOIA requests and otherwise brought up to bear for different studies. People wanted to look at it. So eventually we'll know the truth. The truth will out, Eric. I just think, unfortunately, it's going to be a very, very tight measure for them to out that truth very quickly here before all the votes are certified. More importantly, they have to have a lot of things go their way. It's not just Michigan. It's Pennsylvania, maybe something out west in Arizona and Nevada. We know there are, as we say, a lot of smoke plumes from different factors here, both on the software, that is the process they use to actually tally the votes, then on the election day shenanigans is step number 2, and then it goes through this big dark pipeline, comes out the other end. We have a listening ear right before it hits the dashboards on the New York Times, and that tells us something really weird is going on. And so, votes are and elections are not happening in a vacuum. You have to see them as a trajectory from previous elections. While many people thought in 2016 that 80,000 votes would have turned the election towards Clinton, at the same time, President Trump garnered 2 million more votes than Governor Romney in 2012. So when we look now in that trajectory there, we see some really odd anomalies. As we said, President Trump got 10 million more votes as an incumbent, and by all counts and measures, he should have won. But the facts are the facts, and we have to get to those. Hopefully there'll be some jury, some judge that will be able to give them some time to make their case or not.
Yeah, and Justin, as you kind of step back, one of the things that we hear from our viewers every day is how frustrated they are because a lot of them, some of them are Democrats, some of them are Republicans, we've got liberals, we've got conservatives, but everyone wants to be able to believe in the integrity of our elections. When you look at what's happening across the country and you look at these problems, not just in Michigan, but in Pennsylvania, in Arizona, just give us a little bit of a forward-looking perspective. If you could wave a magic wand, what are the things that we need to do to make sure that everyone can have confidence in our elections?
Well, just like we have a standardization for different industries, whether it's agricultural or electronic, we need to have a standardization for our electioneering system. We all went through, or some of us went through, old enough to go through the 2000 nightmare there, right? Hanging chads and big bags of votes in Broward County. Well, you'll notice Florida was the very first state done with all their votes. By the time it hit 8 o'clock, they were done. They had their results. They knew what it was because they weren't going to go through that pain. I hope this pain that we're putting these states through now makes them rethink everything about how they do elections, and that there's some type of, bar that's going to come down on these people. Obviously, we got word that Attorney General Barr is not going to do it, so we need to lower a bar in a different way, if you catch my drift.
You bet. And Justin, just in the 15 seconds that we have left, what's the data that you're going to be looking for in the next couple of days as it comes out? What are the next things that you and our viewers need to be looking at?
Well, the data will be coming straight out of the courts. What will they accept as affidavits? Will they take, for example, algorithms and the type of anomalies that we've discussed as evidence of wrongdoing, as evidence of something that's amiss? Those are the things I'll be looking at very closely on the newswires.
Awesome. Well, Justin, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for the work that you're doing to dig into all of these irregularities and anomalies. We look forward to having you back